So, with that being said, welcome to the Behavioral Elements Lunch and Learn with myself, Francesca, and Terry. Excited to have you all back. We are going to dig in to some interesting topic areas today, and I'm going to start with IQ. All right, so for the entire topic, it's IQ, EQ, BQ, and AQ. And if you're wondering what those means, it's intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, behavioral quotient, and adaptability quotient. All right. So, one of the things that I think is really interesting, team, is when we have heard about all of these different emotional intelligence, behavioral intelligence, intelligence in general, one of the things that we have learned through research is that intelligence is not the marquee for whether somebody's going to be successful in a position. It can be a number of different things. It can be behavioral intelligence, it can be emotional intelligence. What were your thoughts when you heard that for the first time? I'm curious.
I knew it intrinsically, right? I'm a reasonably intelligent fellow, but I've seen plenty of smart people not be able to relate to other people, not be aware of how they show up, not be super adaptable, not have the discipline or the behaviors that they need to be consistent. So it made a lot of sense, and I was kind of happy that, or they didn't regulate their emotions properly. I was kind of happy that they said, "Hey, maybe this isn't the end all be all. You can be smart and still be well, I can't use the word that I was thinking of, but the second word is up in the sentence."
I like it. Francesca, what are your thoughts?
I would just have to echo what Terry said. I think it was really well stated. Very similar viewpoint.
Okay. So, when we think of something like IQ, this is the marker for students. This is something that kids are still tested on today to find out what their IQ scores are. And when we think about whether or not that's a predictor of success, I tend to agree with you. And I'm going to tell you basically a quick story. I think that I have worked with people in my career, PhDs, MIT, and a number of other things, and just IQ must be off the chart. And yet, those people were struggling to get grants. They were struggling to connect with any of their other employees. They had retention issues. They had major problems. Super smart. I mean, like wicked smart. Couldn't necessarily navigate. And that was something that I really found to be fascinating is why do you think there's still such a reliance on IQ? And I know that this has shifted quite a bit, but why do you think that there's still such a reliance on IQ? What is it about that do you think really kind of signifies like, hey, this is something important, your IQ score? What are your thoughts? Francesca, lead it off. Go ahead.
I would probably say one of the people who has inspired me in this area would be one of my former business coaches. He wrote a best-selling book, Buy Back Your Time, very intelligent human being. And one of the things that for him and many other founders that I know that have went on to be multi-million billionaires is that they often either dropped out of college, had severe ADHD, different things, and their teachers grading them on their IQ levels and how well and fast they were able to solve a math quiz was directly correlated to their intelligence level. And when they were put into a box saying, okay, well, here's your identity now, because you couldn't do these in this particular rubric or in this model under a time crunch, you're not going to succeed in the world. And I love the fact that now him and his wife, the way that they are now raising their children is, they ask their kids, how are you showing up in your class? Are you kind to the people around you? Are you curious about what you're learning? Are you finding what you're learning interesting? And they're basing it more off of, they really don't care about their kids' grade. It's not that they don't care about their education, but it's more about what kind of person are you becoming? How do you learn the best? And how can we model that so that way you can be the most successful that you can be? And I really love that. I think that there has been to date a lot of emphasis and focus on the IQ level. Not that that's not important, but as we were saying, and what we're going to dive into is there's so many different levels to this. And I think that when the focus is only on one area, it definitely puts a lot of other people in a box where, we see excellence around the world where in the rubric of the school system, they were not said that they were to succeed, and look at what they're doing today. So I don't know, that's my perspective on that for now.
Yeah.
I will echo some of that, and I keep thinking about, I believe it was Epstein who said, if you judge a fish by his ability to climb a tree, right? He's gonna show up as a failure. I've read that there are 8 different learning styles, and generally, at least in the American school system, one different teaching style. So it doesn't jive. And so having a more well-rounded piece, and I saw somebody say something about C plus or C students. Kathy wrote, C students are way better business owners than A plus, need to be well rounded. And I just love that statement and am a huge fan. I wasn't quite a C plus student, but that was pretty close.
All right. I wasn't quite a C plus. I was on the other side of it, and I still have I have a reasonably high IQ. But with that being said, it didn't predict whether or not I was going to be successful, motivated, engaged, or anything else in what I was learning. Now, one of the things that I did see in the chat, and I really like this, where is it? Yes, Sarah had said it. IQ is thought of more of the objective analytical results, right? And part of that I think is important because there are positions out there that do require a lot of analysis, pattern recognition, detection, etc. That IQ could be a marker that would maybe predict, is this person going to be able to learn this effectively, or is this person going to be able to navigate some of the computational aspects of it effectively? But I don't think it's going to be a predictor of whether or not that person is going to be successful, because humans are complex. There's a lot going on there. And I see that kind of coming through in a number of the different comments that are coming through in the chat. So I think this topic is really landing with some people. So we've all got these feelings on it. Um,
I
I
want
guess,
to I want to address one thing Francesca said
yeah.
and relate it to the world that some of us with more gray hair might remember. She mentioned the ADHD. In my day, we just called it bored.
Sure.
Right? You were just, it was like if the class moved too slow, you would check out because you had the intellectual capability to think about multiple things at the same time. And the way schools work in general, unless you get moved up into the advanced classes, they're teaching not necessarily even to the middle, they're teaching to the lower end, right? The no student left behind act, which I fully support. But you can't shuffle a deck full of high performers, middle performers, and low performers, then teach to the low performers and expect the high performers to stay engaged.
So well said, Terry. And I just want to comment on what Sharon put in the chat. She says, I had a former supervisor who was extremely intelligent, extremely well spoken, but I don't think he even had an EQ. High turnover resulted because of this. I have had a couple leaders of this nature, incredibly intelligent, high IQ, but you get them to try to empathize with their team, how they're feeling, and actually care about what the people around them are doing. And it's true, right? One doesn't necessarily relate to the other. And I love that we're talking about this today. I think it's really powerful, especially in leadership.
Yeah. And, I think it is one of those things, and I'm going to comment on what Jeff had said earlier in the chat too. For many years, I felt everyone fixated on IQ or technical ability and not EQ or interpersonal skills. And, it's interesting, Jeff, because I agree with you. And I think that there is now at least some recognition like, hey, wait a second, we also have to interact with people. The only constant in every job, in every profession, is at some point, unless you're, I guess, maybe on a nuclear sub, but then maybe you still have like one or two people you have to deal with, but you have to deal with people. And if you're not able to present your ideas effectively, if you're not able to emotionally connect with somebody, if you're not able to create the conditions of psychological safety, you're going to end up having a dysfunctional team. And I think that that's a big part of what we're looking at here is over reliance on something like IQ can certainly be a pathway to, I'm going to call it extinction inside a business. So,
Sarah's comment. I wasn't going to say it, but the thought crossed my mind. She's
no one wants
accurate.
to. Hey, you know what? I might go give it a shot to work with Sheldon Cooper just for a minute, just to see what kind of what kind of humor would come from that. So let's talk a little bit about EQ, right? Emotional quotient. So all of these cues, by the way, are just the measurement functions of particular different, whether it's intelligence, whether it's emotions, whether it's behavior, or whether it's adaptability. So at the end, I'm going to say which one, I'm going to ask you, which one do you think should be taught in school? All right. I'm going to ask you that. Don't answer yet. Let's get through the conversation. But I think that this is an interesting concept. Emotional intelligence has been neglected inside of primary school, secondary school, and all the way through. Like, I do not really remember anybody teaching about, personal awareness, how to navigate different things. Maybe my kindergarten teacher taught us, don't hit people. And that was really about as far as our emotional intelligence came along. What is it when we think about emotional intelligence? And again, I'll kind of quantify it. There's four quadrants by most of the literature, and I'll lean into Daniel Goleman, for sort of the structure of it. Social awareness, relationship management, that's two of the pillars. Personal awareness and personal management, those are the other two pillars. So you got these four quadrants, two of them being internal, two of them being more of the social, the outside, two of them being awareness, two of them being management. That's the easy cadence to really think about emotional intelligence. When was it that maybe, and I'm going to ask both of you because I'm curious, when was it that you realized that maybe emotional intelligence, and both of you are very good with relationships and connections and being able to, sort of bridge that gap. When was it that you realized emotional intelligence may be partially a superpower?
Go ahead, Terry. Take the baton on this one, and then I'll follow.
It's interesting because I don't know that I've fully accepted that fact yet. I appreciate that I have been blessed with some level of gravitas, some ability to connect with people, and definitely the ability to make people feel heard, seen, and understood. Um, but I don't know that I would call it a superpower. But I wanna reflect on something you said because. I should have read Goldman's book because I've been playing around with this idea of the awareness quotient for about 15 years and just started talking about the relatability quotient in the last couple of weeks. And evidently it's already covered under EQ. So now I feel silly. Like, Goldman, you beat me to it, you son of a gun. Um, but I listen, the entire world revolves around relationships, and as you've both heard me say a dozen times, communication is the foundation, and the ability to have a vision, enroll people into it through communicating in an impassioned and compassionate way, I think is a secret sauce to success, and hopefully it's not even that big of a secret.
Mm. Well said, Terry.
Well, I'm gonna share with you. I think relatability quotient goes above and beyond emotional intelligence. Just so you know, I think that there's space, and I think that you're on the right track because somebody can have sort of that social awareness aspect of it, and they may be very good at managing, but they may not necessarily be good at creating the conditions for connections. So they may be able to manage in a one-to-one. And I'm not going to go into introversion or extroversion here, but an introvert oftentimes is a great connector, but they may need that relatability factor of reaching out. An extrovert can be a great connector, but they may need the relatability factor of putting other people first or making sure that they're listening as much as they're talking or engaging, etc. So I think that there is aspect of relatability that may not necessarily be covered by emotional intelligence.
Thank you.
Of course. So I'm curious though. Now I look at emotional intelligence as it's a learned skill. This has been demonstrated. They've measured people, put them through different interventions, and taught them how to be more emotionally intelligent, how to improve on things like the awareness factors or the management factors, etc. Whereas IQ, generally you can't train intelligence by the intelligent quotient markers. Now, you're going to shift a little bit here and there, both from an age perspective, from a knowledge perspective, or experience perspective, but generally your IQ is not going to particularly shift by massive amounts, whereas emotional intelligence can shift and change. Francesca, what's your take on the emotional quotient or the emotional aspects of this? Because Terry, we're in a bind here between it is a superpower, not a superpower. I'm curious, where do you land?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I come at it from a bit of a different lens, but some in the audience may relate to this. And probably you and Terry do to some extent as well. So for me, growing up in a household after loss, I don't even know if I had a choice whether or not I could be high on the EQ scale or not, because I spent my entire childhood being very hyper vigilant on like, what did everyone else need around me? How can I soothe, comfort and help my mom and dad through that grief and loss. And because that was so prevalent in our household, there wasn't really a whole lot of room for me to kind of just be a kid. It was, how can I support them? I was very aware and attentive of, oh, now the crying has shifted to this. How can I support them through that? And as any of you know who have lost anyone in any stage of life, grief is not easy for sure. So I would say that was like a huge part of my journey and how that kind of shaped and molded me. And I think that has definitely transited to my present years now. And just that curious, Taylor said that in the chat about being curious in terms of that relatability scale. And I think that when you are so hyper vigilant of the people around you, how they're grieving, how they're suffering, how you can help take that pain away, naturally as an adult, you just become a bit more curious about the people around you, how you can show up for them. And I think that empathetic nature, that empathic nature almost just kind of grows and grows. I would have to argue it's definitely a superpower for sure, but I think that anything that you do can either be a blessing or a curse. It's all how we look at it. I also look at someone like Jay, who any of you who know him in the audience, maybe I'll expose him here, but he's already said this is something you don't already know. On the IQ scale is something that he's very strong in. EQ is something that he's actually had to learn more and more as he's gotten older. And I think that he does an exceptional job, even though it doesn't come naturally to him. And it is something that he has to kind of think about and take a step back and go, how would I word that in a way that would be relatable or empathetic in this particular regard? But he's turned that into a superpower because he's now helping people that if that's not your superpower innately, how can I help you gain that more of that skill, more of that knowledge? And it just goes to show, unlike the emotional like the EQ test that you can take about your personality, this just takes it a step further with like what he teaches with behavior. Yes, it may not be your primary, notion to go into that emotional, that EQ aspect, but if you're able to choose a behavior and a pathway forward to say that may not be my superpower, but I'm going to make it one, I think that it's really powerful. And thank you for putting that cheat sheet in there. I just saw that. That's awesome. But that's my take on it. I think that any of these are a superpower if you allow them to.
I want to comment on something that and make sure it's super clear. You started practicing emotional awareness and empathy at a very young age because you felt the need to, or it was asked of you, or required of you, or you just naturally knew it was the right thing to do. And that's the beauty of this, right? It's any muscle we have. We want it to get bigger. We need to use it. And so Jay has done an exceptional job. Did I point the right way? Am I pointing at Jay right now? I don't know. It looks like it maybe. Has done an exceptional job at coming at this and being empathetic and caring. And it's because he's intentional with it and practices it frequently. And we all have that ability on this particular topic. And I would encourage all of us to use it.
100% Terry.
I really appreciate that. And, it is one of those things where I look at it and I think I got really frustrated with where people, and this is maybe one of my frustrations with IQ, right? Because it's not something that you can control. It's not something that you can change. You can't just all of a sudden be like, hey, I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to be smarter. Like, it doesn't work like that. We can work to elevate our knowledge or our skills or our wisdom, but it's not something that puts the locus of control here. And that was really why something like emotional quotient or emotional intelligence and behavioral intelligence really resonated with me, because it was one of those where it's like, wait, I can be the master of my own destiny in this space. I can learn to adapt my behaviors. I can learn to shift my behavior, or I can learn to shift my emotions or my understanding of emotions. So if you're looking at, let's shift gears here. Let's get into behavioral quotient, because this is one that obviously the three of us really study hard, with everything from behavioral elements and adaptive behaviors and functional behaviors. Let's sort of delineate out a little bit of the emotional intelligence and behavioral intelligence. Emotions, obviously, being one of the things that triggers sets of behaviors, but it's not the only thing that triggers the behaviors. So the behavioral quotient is much more along the lines of recognizing where environment, culture, and all of the other stimuli that contribute to our behaviors. And that's the neurobiology and all that fun stuff. So, from a behavioral quotient, and we're not going to compare it against emotional intelligence just yet, but behavioral intelligence, what are your thoughts in terms of how should somebody be thinking about the behavioral intelligence when walking into, say, a new job or a new position or maybe a new leadership position? What do you think on that question?
I go back to the idea of awareness, right? And I don't know how many people actually are intentional about how they show up. I don't know that we think about the wake we make, which is an article that I'm writing for tomorrow based on a paddleboard ride on Sunday, or the ripple effect, which is, the same thing, right? We have this long tail of results due to the law of cause and effect. And I'm not sure how many people think about that. But, if we were to become cognizant of it and to be aware of it and think about how we show up, how our behavior impacts those around us, I feel like we might make different decisions. Not all the time, right? But as needed. And that's kind of the world that I'm really gunning for, is people become situationally aware and adjust accordingly. Listen, you don't have to be exceptional 24/7, but there are times throughout the day when you absolutely need to be. So put your energy toward that, and then you can take the rest of the day, maybe not all the way off, but at a lower level.
Francesca, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to what Terry was saying. I think that to an extent, and I mean, it's great that we have such an incredible tool with behavioral elements to use, because it just clarifies so much. And I think that, when it comes to the behavioral quotient, I think that it definitely ties in perfectly to the adaptability quotient too, because I was thinking about this earlier. It's kind of like a GPS, right? When a road is closed, if you have high AQ, the person's quickly finding a new route instead of just sitting there honking the horn. And I think to an extent in work and life, the only constant is change, right? So the more that we're able to be adaptable and be able to see the people around us, not just go into a meeting with one standard talk or presentation or whatever, but really read the audience. You're going to know energetically. It might be the same set of people that you see every week, but you will know within seconds, okay, there's something energetically that's a bit different today. How can I adapt and show up behaviorally for these people so they are leaving with the most impact or whatever it is that you're wanting to do? And, Terry, myself, and Jay were just talking about this yesterday. I saw a quote on, leaving the room better than you found it. And I love the fact that, like, we're very grateful to be able to have so many incredible people in our orbit that are actively wanting to do that through behavioral elements, because there's an awareness of, when I leave this room, what kind of impact am I leaving? And the three of us aren't sitting here today because we're perfect at this. Gosh, human as can be. We mess up at this all the time, constantly learning. The whole point of this, though, with that adaptability is you grow, you learn, you go, okay, another speed bump. That's not what I want to, how I want to show up. How do I readjust? And it's that constant moving along, readjusting. And once we're able to recognize this, we're never going to get this right. And someone said in the chat here too, let me just go back up because I want to mention this, ties in. Someone had asked about how the emotional quotient comes into, with trauma or anything that you've experienced in your life. And I think what happens too is that if we're able to recognize that this is all about behavioral patterns, the patterns don't necessarily go away. They just become more subtle the more aware we can become of them. There's certain things that I recognize that I will do or say, and I'm like, oh, that's where that's coming from. It's not that it goes away, but we're able to catch it earlier on. We're able to navigate it earlier on. And as time goes on, that becomes more subtle. It's the same way that someone like Jay can walk into a situation and go, oh, this is how I'm able to put that lens of the emotional quotient onto here and do X, Y, and Z, because this is a pathway forward that is really great for this scenario, or Terry or myself. And that's kind of how we can adapt in that way. So I think in business and personal, whatever it is, this is a huge game changer. And we're lucky because, I mean, there's a lot of people that they're just starting to learn this whole a new lens of looking at things this way.
I'm going to jump in on Gino's question about the thoughts on effects of trauma on people's EQ. And I'm going to try not to go too Sheldon Cooper on this question. But when we think about trauma, ultimately what it is it's an immediate shock to the system. And it is often housed in the brain in the limbic system and the amygdala. And one of the interesting things about trauma is that not all traumas are created equally. And we can look at some things, and some people experience traumas very differently. Each of us could potentially lose a loved one, and the impact on the limbic system or the amygdala may be very, very different for me versus Francesca versus for Terry versus for any of you. So it's really difficult to discern and say, hey, this trauma has this impact. But what we can say is that any time that there's a shift in that limbic reaction or a learned, essentially reactive behavior, one of the things that that does impact is it creates the conditions of what I'm going to call almost like shading. Okay. So any behavior that resembles the trauma is automatically shaded with a particular lens. So when a trauma occurs, it may make it very difficult to discern, was that person really attacking me, or was it just that they were distracted? If I've experienced trauma of being attacked or being abandoned or something of that nature, I might have a particular lens that ends up shaping that. Is that something that we can overcome? I mean, yes, the answer to that is yes. In 99% of the cases that they're looking at with things like cognitive behavioral therapy, sometimes advanced psychedelics or other things, we can actually rewire those parts of the brain that have swelled as a result of something like a trauma. So sorry to go fully science on that, Gino, but does it impact? The answer to that is probably yes. Is it something that can be overcome? Yes, I do believe that it can be. This is one of the powers of neuroplasticity. And as neuroscience advances, we are learning that what was once thought that your brain stops being neuroplastic or that you stop generating new neurons, we now know that that's not true. The neuroscience has demonstrated that we continue to have neuroplasticity far into our later years. And this is exciting, folks. The brain does create new neurons, and you can actually, now, not at the rate as when we were a child, not at the rate as when we were younger, but it is something that we can still adapt through that neuroplasticity, which is pretty cool. No, you don't, Sarah. You do not regret that Sheldon Cooper statement. Let me let me comment real quick on this, and this is why I put BQ third, behavioral quotient third. This is one of the formulas that I have found to be very, very helpful as I've navigated sort of managing my own behaviors. Is thinking about T plus F equals B. All right. Now, I've told you all many times that I do not do math. I speak for a living, but this is about as algebraic as you're going to get from me. Thoughts plus feelings equal behavior. The emotional quotient side of things is really related to the feelings. How are we navigating our feelings? How do we understand the feelings inside, outside, and the environment that it is? The thoughts oftentimes are the more intelligence quotient aspect of things. This is how we think, this is how we process logic, information. It's those two things together that ultimately leads and generates our behaviors. And I think behavioral intelligence is all about making that equal sign longer so we can choose better behaviors. Because we've all had that emotional reaction where we immediately jump in and do something and then immediately regret it. And we've all had that emotional reaction where we've said something maybe we thought was witty and it just didn't land the same way with anybody else. So this is really about extending that. That's how I see behavioral intelligence is
I'm
really.
sorry, we're not laughing at you, Jay. Just you put T plus F equals B
Oh,
instead
I
of
saw
I thought it
Stuart.
was Terry and Francesca equals besties.
I was I was trying to gloss over so Stuart didn't distract my diatribe of algebra. I can get very easily distracted when I start doing T plus F equals B.
It's so
I
good.
like that though.
High
So
quality, high quality. I feel seen, right? Sometimes you say something and you instantly regret. I haven't had that experience in about 23 hours. So super excited about that. Very, very good that I'm not the only one.
So let's jump into adaptability quotient. Now, this is one that I don't think gets a whole lot of play on the radio. But I do think that this is one of the key skills. It is one of the key adaptability is one of the key skills that's identified year after year by Forbes, by Business Insider, by Harvard as one of the critical skills of success in the workplace, especially in the last 5 years. I think we all know why. So, in terms of adaptability quotient, what are your thoughts? Level of importance. What are your thoughts on how that shows up for you all, or maybe how it shows up in people that you've seen interact at work? I'm curious. Let's open a discussion on adaptability quotient.
That's the superpower, right? Being adaptable, whether it's in conversation, whether it's in building relationships, whether it's in finding new ways, anything to do to get yourself out of honking at the road closed sign and being resourceful enough to find a new way to get something done. That's the superpower.
And Francesca?
Yeah, I mean, to what Terry was saying and what I said earlier, it's like that GPS being able to quickly reroute. And, I saw a reel, it was on Instagram a couple days ago, and it was talking about how it was kind of alluding to the fact that we're very hard on ourselves as human beings, but it was mentioning how, do you ever notice that with a GPS, when you take the wrong turn, it doesn't say, like, you idiot, why? I mean, it'd be funny if it did. But it doesn't. It just says recalculating. Recalculating. And how often are we so stuck in the, oh my gosh, I made the wrong choice or whatever. But the more that we're able to have that AQ of, okay, recalculating, and how do I pivot? And what's next? What's this mean? Jay and myself and Terry use this expression a lot. It's by that Navy SEAL who wrote the book Extreme Ownership. He asks the question a lot of, what is this here to teach me? And every single time that we do have a roadblock or there's a red light, quote unquote, or some kind of figurative roadblock, asking ourselves, what's this here to teach me? And the quicker that we're able to put our turning signal left and right or do a U-turn fully is really, I mean, that's where it's at, right? But I think that almost with EQ, AQ, and the BQ, I feel like they almost work together like a tripod, right? Because if one leg's missing, you're kind of off balance. We could have really, really high EQ and understand people well, but if you have low AQ, I mean, at the end of the day, you're still going to struggle in a fast-changing environment. And if you have high BQ and you know your behavioral style, but you may not have that EQ, well, you're misreading people and you're not really going to be that person that people can relate or rely on because you're not able to kind of read the room in that sense. So I think that the more that we're able to strengthen those muscles in all three areas, I think that we have a very strong tripod that can withstand anything in the works. We have some more chat coming through. What are your thoughts on that, Terry and Jay?
I do. I wanted, ironically enough, you literally led in perfectly. I was going to ask, related to AQ and EQ, right? Like when we find ourselves needing the adaptability intelligence, our ability to shift, that generally means that some kind of change has occurred, some kind of fluctuation, some kind of unanticipated thing. And you two have probably heard me say this way too many times of when we get the call from our boss going, I need you to come down to my office. In the history of no one were they like, yes, it's raise time. They were like, no, gosh, what did I do? Or what did I screw up? Because uncertainty creates a particular set of emotions in each of us that are related to that survival function and fear. So when we're thinking about being adaptable, what do you see as the sort of interplay between the adaptability intelligence and the emotional intelligence? I kind of just heard Francesca speak to it. What are your thoughts on that, Terry? How do you manage emotions in those times where we need adaptability?
Talk about this with my kid a lot. And it's the idea that you want to make a decision based on A or B, and you need to look at what's the absolute worst thing that could happen. Okay, you could die, right? That's always the absolute worst thing that could happen. What's a step above that? Figure out a quick, like, if this happens, then I'll do this. And then, so there's your thought process. And then figure out, are you excited to do this or not do it? There's your feeling process, right? What's the level of interest in doing it? And that's kind of how I make decisions throughout everything, right? And the only caution I have with exercising the adaptability muscle too much is you become reliant on it. So you do a launch, right? You come up with a business idea, you come up with a program, a plan, whatever the case, and you put it out there and you don't get the response that you expected within the first 14 seconds. And then you've written it off, it doesn't work, and you're on to the next thing. Now, clearly, I am speaking from experience, so this may only be me, but I tend to jump through things instead of letting them simmer because there's no shortage of creativity, there's no shortage of ideas, there's no shortage of ways that I believe I can add value to other people. So I'll just move on to the next one. And there are times when being hyper adaptable can be a disservice. Again, maybe I'm just speaking in my own world, but thanks for listening. It's like now I need to lay on a couch or something. Who knows?
I'll pull the couch out later, or actually, Francesca has a place on the couch.
The boom! Oh,
You like that? Drop the podcast for you. So,
nice drop.
Oh, that's awesome.
well, from the adaptability thing, and that's always been, I think, one of the areas because some people seem to be inherently more adaptive, and I'm not going to call them air elements, but I'll call them air elements. And in many cases, we see fire being able to adapt quite a bit, depending on which direction the wind is coming. We see a little bit less adaptability from the structured side of the behavioral elements wheel. So the water, the earth side, usually for very different reasons. Sometimes it's kind of the process and the reliability of it on the earth side. Sometimes it's more of the people and making sure that we're just not adapting our way out of, the entire group, or making sure that, all the group is in line with the adaptiveness. So, Terry, from your perspective, and I'll ask this too, Francesca, even though that you're not necessarily the heir, but I'm asking Terry, how do you develop that ability to kind of say, we'll figure it out? It's that's a word, by the way. That string of words I am banned from using inside of my company. I'm told that I'm not allowed to do that, that I need a process and a plan. So I go way the wrong way on this. So I'm curious, what is it? How do you grow your adaptability? What are some things that maybe you've done to nurture your adaptability as you've gone? And Francesca, I'm going to ask you the same question. So feel free to answer after Terry does.
Eliminate the fear of trying, right? And recognize that, yes, we live in a world where end results matter, but you don't get end results without putting in the effort first. And so to build that muscle, you have to be willing to try new things. What's the phrase? Be brave enough to suck at something new. That's like almost my watchwords, right? I'm like, I'm gonna go, I might be horrible at it, but if it's of interest, you have to start. I just told a story about an event I did 11 years ago. I was on a coaching call before this, and the room held 330 people. There were 125 people who bought tickets. This was before I thought uh, optics are more important than revenue. And I don't know where I fall, and that's a different conversation. Long story short, 125 people in, so a third of the room full. One of the speakers who put on events for 7 years before that, and I was at his very first one, called me after and said, "Do you know that back in 2008, when you did this event, that had 70 or 80 people in it, only eight of them had paid. I called every friend, every family member, anyone I could get to be in that room so it didn't look empty." And I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm saying it for one reason. And that reason is this: you can't have a second until you do the first. And now I've told that story from 11 years ago twice in the last hour and a half because it's an important lesson.
Well, I like that though. And for me, I actually have to pull back on my adaptability. Um, so for anybody that has heard this before, I like to do survival trips, go out into the woods, no food, no water, see how long I can survive. 10 days, I think, is my longest. 3 days is my shortest, but I've survived them all. One of my business partners actually got me a field knife. It's a beautiful knife and it's engraved with "We will figure it out." And because I think I've used that phrase and I saw Stewart's phrase in there. And yes, Sarah, to your question, the top of the wheel is much more the unstructured side of things. So this is the side that's going to be a little bit more easily adaptable. Remember, we have all four elements. So there's probably spaces where change makes a ton of sense to you, even if that's a little bit scary and it's easier to go. And I think that's what Terry's talking about is, all right, taking that first step towards change can sometimes be the game changer. Haha. All right, Francesca, what do you got for us?
Absolutely. I would say for me, in terms of adaptability and change, and for any of you in the audience that don't know my elements, I'm primary fire, backed by water and then air. But I would definitely say, in terms of the adaptability, especially growing up in competitive sports, doing that for 20 plus years, I mean, you kind of do have that mentality of adaptability, you know, no matter what happens in your program, especially if you're at a high stakes competition, you can't just sit on the ground after falling from a double Lutz and be like, oh, that sucked. It's about how fast are you able to get up and adapt regarding the situation. But I would say for me, I mean, the greatest way to probably word this would be that, like, I think based on, I know I go back to this a lot, but it's just a fact, so I'll say it. Because I wasn't really supposed to be here, I was born because of a loss and that whole situation. I look at any day that I have on this earth, I'm like, it's a gift. I wasn't even supposed to be here, so if I have today, what can I do with it? And that's one of the questions I ask myself in the morning is, Francesca, you have one day, what are you doing with it? And yes, there's some days where it's just an average day, but for the most part, where this, I guess the adaptability comes in is I don't really, like Terry was saying, I don't really have a lot of fear. So like if I want to start a podcast, I'm like, yeah, sure, let's go, let's do it. I am alive today. I have the ability to, why not? And if it fails, I really don't care. You can never fail from trying. At least I got to say that I tried. So I think that that's kind of been my mentality for most things is that I will put my all into something, and as to the result, I have no control over that, but none of us do. So the more that we're able to just kind of step into the ring. And I love how Stuart said one of his things was, hear me out, I'll make it work, or it'll work is his usual phrase that gets people on edge around him. And I love that. I agree with it. That most of the things that I've decided to do in my life and haven't necessarily had a lot of a plan. But some of the best things have come from that too.
Yeah. No, I think that's good wisdom. So, all right, let's think about this because there's a lot of cues that we were talking about, all these different quotients. And when we start really kind of evaluating how do we build, how do we make ourselves better, if you were to say a client comes in, and since both of you do coaching, a client comes in and they're very low on all of the quotients, and you can only pick one to help them start with, which one are you going to help them start with first? I think all are important, but which one are you going to help them start with first?
It's so situational because it depends on what their goals are, right? It depends on what they're doing. Because there's a definitive argument for any of it. If they're leaders and trying to build a team, that emotional quotient becomes super huge. If they're a sales guy and trying to build a business, that behavioral quotient becomes really huge, not only to recognize who they're trying to work with, but to show up and build the habits and discipline. Um, if they're, a creative type, man, now you need the AQ. And we've already decided that you're not really building someone's IQ for them, but there are some books that I'd recommend to read and maybe at least expand the education base. So, it's a tricky question, you sneaky fellow, you. But I'll go with BQ. Good answer. Good answer. Yes.
All right. Well, you might be playing to the crowd, but I'm okay with it. Francesca, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm on a behavioral elements lunch and learn. I feel like my answer kind of has to be BQ. I'm going to speak out of the box here, though. I agree with Terry. I think that the beauty of this is that any of these are skills are not fixed traits. And with that neuroplasticity and that ability to grow and change, we can strengthen those muscles in all three areas. But I would have to say that my instinct, and maybe I'll speak prior to being introduced to behavioral elements, would be the adaptability quotient would be my number one factor that I would focus on, because then from there they can adapt their communication, they can adapt how quickly they're able to deal with whatever scenario, whatever turmoil is happening. And I just feel like to some extent we could have all the intelligence in the world or all the emotional intelligence in the world, and that's great. But to an extent, I mean, if something goes wrong and all of a sudden you throw your hands up and you're a puddle on the ground, both of those things aren't doing anything for you anymore. So I think the more that we're able to adapt and kind of just teeter-totter between the two, and like we said, constant's the only change is the only constant. So that would be my answer.
I like
How
it.
about you, Jay?
Well, see, I look to how can I game this system and really elevate all three at once. And I do think it starts with behavior because I think if you can actually get somebody to get into the habits and the actual behavioral practices of, hey, here's the behavior that I want you to do active listening. What am I actually doing? I'm increasing their ability to emotionally connect with people, but I'm also doing it from a behavioral standpoint. If I want somebody to maybe learn adaptability, I'm going to encourage them through to do that through behavior. I'm going to say, listen, on the way home from work this week, I want you to find 5 different ways to go through work. What are we actually doing? We're training them through a behavioral practice of becoming more adaptable to their environment, to the surroundings. So I agree with both of you, as you probably guessed, given that, the background of behavioral scientists. But I do think that there are really powerful ways that you can really leverage all three elements of the stools. I think you could probably do the same thing from an adaptability standpoint as well, that's going to help shift a behavior or shift an emotion, or from an emotional standpoint, that's going to shift a behavior or shift your adaptability to an unknown circumstance. But I generally like to start with behavior. So let me ask this, audience, if you were to rate yourself across the 4 different quadrants, IQ, EQ, BQ, and AQ, as we've been talking about, where do you think your superpower strength lies? Which one do you think is your superpower? Which one do you think that you would have the highest marks in if we were doing a quotient analysis for all of those for you? Where do you land? Not what's most important, but I'm curious, which one do you think is your superpower? I see Lisa says emotional. Oh, Stuart's got them in order for us. IQ, AQ, BQ, EQ. Fair. Sharon, AQ. Stephanie, EQ. Tina, BQ. Jeff, AQ. Emotional for Bo. Bill is AQ. Wow, we've got it all over the board, team.
Nice.
It's a good mix.
Yeah, Beth, EQ. Gino, AQ. Stacy, EQ. Erwin, AQ.
I'm curious if people would have felt the same way if we would have asked this question at the top of the hour.
I'm curious too. We should have done the pre and post. So we got 7 minutes left. Here's my question for Terry and Francesca. If those are the superpowers that exist, if you're to give a piece of advice, a tactic, a strategy, a tool, something that would help elevate one of the cues, and we know that we're not dealing with IQ here. I'm going to let you answer first, pick one of the quotients, and give a tactic or two of how you would work to help elevate that. I'll take whatever the last one is.
Nice.
Go ahead, Francesca.
Sure. I'll choose AQ maybe. You can call it the pivot practice. So once a week, change something in your routine on purpose. Take a new route, work in a different space, and train your adaptability muscle. It's small, but those micro shifts will make a difference over time. Trust me.
I love the pivot practice. Well done. Terry, it's on you.
I'm going to hit EQ and I'm going to tell you to get really in touch with your feelings. If you're mad, be mad. If you're sad, be sad. If you're glad, be glad. Just sit with it, experience it. And then when you're done, figure out if that was the appropriate level of intensity that you put toward it. Is that too much energy, not enough energy? Because the goal here is to figure out what actually truly matters to you. So you're not flying off the handle over every little thing, but you're not numb to big things too.
Love that. Okay. So I guess that leaves me with behavioral quotient. Really, I was thinking that one of you was going to take behavioral quotient. And all right, well, I'm gonna offer two here. I'm gonna offer one, which is to track your habits. And this is a practice I actually just had some executives do. And literally starting their day of give me the normal day, give me everything that you do. Walk me through your entire day of what a normal, typical day looks like. And I was writing down each of the behaviors. So it was, get up, take the dog outside, make coffee, do this, do this, do this. And when we started to go through that process of actually tracking what are the behaviors that are serving you, because I didn't let them just get away with it. I was like, okay, you didn't say look at your phone. You didn't say doom scroll. You didn't say check your email. You didn't say this. And I held them accountable. They're like, okay, the first thing I do is I check my phone. All right, put that into the list and actually do a habit audit of what it is that you're doing every single day. Because I think that really sets you up for success from a behavior standpoint. If you want to add a new behavior into your regime, do it on something that you're already doing every day. Like, for example, I just started adding a new vitamin into my routine. It's sitting right next to the coffee maker. I know every day I'm going to that coffee maker, that vitamin's going to be there, and I'm going to take my vitamin. So that would be number one. Is number two, find whatever the behavior is. Do that one first. The second part, find one of those behaviors that is not serving you and work to make friction. What do I mean by friction? Make it harder to do that. So maybe every night, one of my behaviors is snacking. Okay? Make it harder to snack. Don't buy the stuff. That's the best option. Or go put all the snacks in the garage. And if you need a snack at night, you're now going to have to leave your house, go outside, go to the garage, get the snacks out of the garage, feeling that you're going to make a better decision all the way to the place. That is, if I was going to improve your behavioral quotients, track and then pick one and really focus on adding friction into that space. That would be the behavioral quotient. All right, team, we're at the end of our hour. Any final words from you?
I'm still pushing for awareness quotient. We need to keep that measured internally and externally. Are we aware of who we are and how we operate, and are we aware of how we show up? That's my AQ for you.
Amen, Terry.
Love it.
Mine for all of you is just show up curious. I think it strengthens all three of the muscles. Just be curious. Game changer.
Love it. And my last comment is thank you. Thank you for taking an interest in all things behavior, emotions, adaptability, and intelligence. We're always excited to host you and have these conversations. Thank you for your comments, your questions. And of course, if you want to ask anything further, reach out to Terry, myself, Francesca. We're here to help, we're here to serve, and we're looking forward to seeing you next time on our Behavioral Elements Lunch and Learn in the month of September. In the meantime, be safe, healthy, and well, and take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.